Hey everyone, I've got something to tell you today. I hate to bring it up during a happy moment, but please pay attention.
It was the birthday of my father-in-law, and 15 family members had gathered. But it was then that my husband Brian stood up with a serious expression on his face. When everyone stopped talking, they all started looking at Brian. The family members were all murmuring to each other, curious about what would happen next. Seeing this, Brian began to speak slowly.
So, I just learned that Rebecca, my wife, has a $100,000 debt. She got herself into this mess without telling me. And the crazy part is, it's all because of some financial disaster at the company she works for.
Even though Brian told the family, they didn't react quickly and stayed quiet. This was because they knew I'm good at managing money and that I was a diligent worker. So the idea of me having a $100,000 debt was like impossible to them. Brian was annoyed by how slow his family was reacting, so he took out a paper from his pocket and showed it to them.
Everyone, what I'm saying is true. Here's the proof. Look, here's a paper that says she owes $100,000.
Yes, that paper he showed had my name on it. It looked pretty basic, like something you could make on a computer, but Brian was so pleased with himself. As if basking in victory, he then cast a cold glance and harsh words towards me alone.
Actually, I've been enduring this for a while, Rebecca. As my wife, you haven't fulfilled your duties. Despite my efforts to earn money, you as my wife do not support me, who's your husband. On top of that, a debt of $100,000. I've had enough. I'll take care of the debt, so you just pay what you can right now.
The relatives started to believe Brian more because of that paper he showed and how he acted, and soon everyone was talking about it. However, I alone remained calm, observing Brian's behavior. That's because I had seen through his lies. He was doing this outrageous thing just to steal money from me. Moreover, it's something that would easily be uncovered if investigated. How stupid can he be? Stop lying about me having a $100,000 debt. Seriously. Do you think I don't know anything? With that thought in my heart, I turned to face Brian again.
What are you so relaxed about? Just admit your guilt. I'm even considering the divorce, you know?
As if threatening me with a card of divorce, Brian blurted out. Yet I remained composed, which only made his tone grow stronger. The more serious he sounded, the more determined I felt. If he was going to trap people with lies, it seemed I had no choice but to corner him thoroughly. I had prepared for this moment. I took a deep breath and glared at Brian. He looked at me slowly to see how I reacted to his lies. I felt sick looking at Brian's annoying smirk. Today I was determined to send this man to hell. You say I haven't fulfilled my duties as a wife? Well then, I'd like to hear about you. What about you? Caught off guard by my unexpected rebuttal, Brian was clearly flustered. Before he could argue back, I pressed on. I work full-time just like you. I do the cleaning and laundry before going to work, and no matter how tired I am, I prepare dinner for both of us after coming back home. Even on weekends, I wake up as usual and take care of the household chores. What about you? Have you ever done even a bit of housework? Brian was trying to reply, but all he could do was open and close his mouth like a fish. Couldn't say anything back. Brian didn't do any housework. It's not the time when only wives are expected to handle household chores. He insisted that housework is a woman's job and didn't lift a finger. Both of us work, so Brian should do his part at home too. The relatives were starting to look at Brian with disapproval. I decided to expose Brian's usual behavior to the relatives. Oh, you come home late, so you can't do housework, right? But your late returns aren't because of work, are they? Weren't you just out drinking? Even on days off, you could at least make up for it, but you either sleep until the afternoon or just go out. You don't do any housework at all. I'm usually the quiet one, but when I argued back, it caught Brian off guard and, amusingly, flustered him. I had never been strong in my words towards Brian before. We never fought as husband and wife, but it wasn't because our relationship was great. I was just tolerating it all. Brian thinks he's all that and hates being told he's wrong. I'm just expressing my opinion, but Brian seems to think he's being denied. If you disagree with him even a little, he totally loses it. I figured this out pretty quick after we tied the knot, so now I just keep quiet and deal with it. Brian, confused and searching for words, finally managed to reply.
What? What do you mean? Men have work-related commitments. I can't just leave on time like you, a woman. You don't understand.
Brian's excuse sounded like he was busy and couldn't do housework. That was the last straw for me. I have commitments too. Gender shouldn't matter. I decline invitations from colleagues and manage my time to balance work and home because of the household responsibilities. I work full-time just like you, yet I manage the household without neglecting my duties. You just laze around and drink after work. Moreover, you're jealous of my higher income and constantly complain about your lower salary. If your salary is low, you should get a qualification or study to make an effort, but you're just playing around. With that attitude, your salary will never increase. I made Brian speechless with my bold attitude. His face turned bright red, flustered because I had hit the nail on the head. I had only stated the facts, yet Brian, proud and competitive, retorted in desperation.
Shut up. How dare you, a woman, act all high and mighty. Don't talk back to a man like me. No matter what you say, your debt won't disappear. You have a debt of $100,000. I will not forgive you for having this debt.
Brian realized he was in a tough spot, so he brought up the debt again. He must think it's his winning card. But the debt was nothing more than Brian's made-up lie. Here's the evidence. As I was thinking about where to start breaking down his story, a voice from the relatives called out. They had been watching our argument and seemed to think it was just a marital spat.
Come on, just talk it out between the two of you.
They tried to calm us down. But this is not just a simple marital quarrel. I'm exposing the true nature of a husband who betrays his wife and tries to trap her. I want my relatives to see where I'm coming from. I'm going to bring out my ace in the hole to deal with my husband's running away and making excuses. You're hiding something too, aren't you? My remark made Brian start to panic in an amusing way. He seemed intent on maintaining his silence, but his eyes were clearly swimming from side to side. It looked like he was planning to get through this without saying anything, so I decided to explain. You're having an affair, aren't you? The places you go to after work aren't for business networking. It's a nightclub, right? You've been smitten with one of the workers there, showering her with quite a bit of money to win her over. And now you two are involved. I said all this in one breath and paused for a moment to watch his reaction. Brian's face turned bright red and he clenched his fists. It was clear he was flustered by being told the truth, but he still wasn't ready to admit it openly. He's too stubborn.
What? Me at a nightclub? You're just making that up out of desperation.
He was desperately trying to talk his way out of it, but sweat was beginning to bead on his forehead. Just one more push. I made that up? I have evidence, you know. Seeing my confident demeanor, Brian gritted his teeth in frustration.
It's because of work. Going to a nightclub is something that happens with work. That's all. There's no showering anyone with money or having a relationship. It must be some misunderstanding.
He was desperately trying to talk his way out with exaggerated words. However, the atmosphere changed drastically when I mentioned the word affair. The relatives started to look at Brian with suspicion, whispering among themselves. Especially the ladies were definitely giving him the evil eye. Even my in-laws, who have been quietly watching the events unfold, couldn't stay silent any longer after hearing that their son was having an affair. They looked at Brian with stern eyes.
Brian, is that true? Are you having an affair? Be honest and answer our questions.
They questioned him in a very stern tone.
I'm not having an affair. Rebecca is just lying to cover up her debt. She's just trying to trap me by lying that I'm having an affair. Please believe me, Dad, Mom.
My in-laws looked back and forth between me and Ryan, their faces filled with confusion. Unlike my lying husband, my in-laws are very sensible people, but they probably also want to believe their own son. They couldn't decide whether what I said was true, As for Brian, he decided to get out of this tight spot by denying everything and getting angry. He doesn't seem to be planning to change his stance of claiming that I am lying. Frowning, he glared at me. Arguing here any further seems pointless. This has gotten a bit long. There's no point in arguing without any evidence. How about this? Let's set another day to talk. I'll bring evidence next time. Brian looked relieved when I suggested it. He probably thought he got away with it for now. My husband is so clueless.
That's fine, but are you sure? You've made a big show of having evidence. You'll regret this.
The face that was bright red a moment ago and sweaty is now relieved, thinking he had escaped. He smirked and relaxed. He might as well make the most of this quick break. The one who'll regret it is not me, but him. Later, the relatives gathered again at my in-laws' house. I arrived on time and ended up welcoming my late-arriving husband. He entered the living room with a young woman. The smell of cheap perfume filled the air. The woman was much younger than my husband, probably just in her 20s. With narrow eyes and thin lips, her plain face was heavily made up. Her eyes, framed by thick eyelash extensions, fluttered as she looked up at my husband. Brian also stretched his nose, placing his hand on the buttocks of the woman wearing a tight miniskirt. Clearly, she was not the kind of woman one would bring to my in-laws' house, but Brian didn't seem to care. Without a word of apology for being late, he introduced her to the relatives.
This is Lisa.
Nice to meet you. Lisa greeted with a sugary, immature tone. Her casual greeting, completely ignoring the atmosphere, irritated the relatives.
Lisa, you have something you want to say, right?
Brian prompted Lisa. Yeah, my dad was deceived by this woman, and he suffered a big loss. While saying this, Lisa pointed her red manicured finger at me. Her explanation was insufficient, and it seemed that my relatives didn't understand anything. They waited for more explanation, but Lisa just smiled happily.
Lisa's father runs a company. He was advised to invest by Rebecca, who works at a securities company, but it seems he suffered a big loss. It was a very risky investment, and it seems there was not enough explanation. Lisa's father demanded compensation for the damages, and Rebecca paid it back, but only a small part was repaid. A significant amount remains as a debt.
Taking over from the unconvincing Lisa, Brian explained with a smirk. He was clearly delighted to put me in a tight spot. Furthermore, today he was very confident bringing Lisa as a supposed witness. Brian sat heavily on the living room sofa, crossing his legs. Next to him, Lisa was leaning on him as if depending on him. Brian must think Lisa depends on him, but he's totally mistaken. So you better pay back the money you borrowed from my dad quickly. Lisa glared at me, opening her narrow eyes as wide as she could. She thinks she's threatening me, but her young and simple face doesn't intimidate me at all. I almost laughed, half in amusement and half in disgust. Lisa looks and acts pretty immature, not just in her appearance. Did she really think she could pull a fast one on me with that fake story? If they are going to come at me with lies, I will meet them with the truth. The doorbell rang at just the right time. I headed to the entrance to welcome the elderly man who had arrived. I escorted the man to the living room. Upon seeing the man, Lisa's expression changed drastically. She gasped, uncrossed her legs, and straightened her posture. Dad, why are you here? As Lisa spoke, the color drained from her face and her body trembled visibly. Just by looking at Lisa's drastic change, it was clear that she had been lying. Oh, Lisa, you look pale. Are you all right? Is something troubling you? I paused for effect before addressing the relatives. Everyone, this Lisa here is a worker at a nightclub. The relatives began to whisper among themselves, saying things like, I knew it, and
I thought her makeup was heavy.
The woman shot piercing looks of disgust at Lisa. Lisa is actually Brian's mistress. Having said this, I looked at my husband. He did not seem intent on hiding his relationship with Lisa as he maintained a confident smile. However, this was just the introduction. The real show was about to begin. I was about to reveal secrets about Lisa that even my husband didn't know. Lisa has not only been involved with Brian, she has also been frequently visiting bars. It seems she was quite smitten with the bartender and has been financially supporting him generously. Soon she ran out of money and began to be in debt. She borrowed a tiny sum and now it's turned into a huge debt because she took money from some dodgy sources. My words seemed to be news to my husband as he looked at Lisa in shock. He should take his time to savor the shock of being betrayed by someone he trusted. Lisa decided to deceive Brian. She fabricated a story that I had advised her father to make an investment that resulted in a loss and that she was burdened with debt because of it. My husband's face grew even paler as he finally realized he had been deceived. He looked at Lisa with a questioning gaze, but Lisa turned away, ignoring him. But there's more to the story, and here comes the climax. Brian, who exactly have you been talking about having debts all this time? The $100,000 debt is Lisa's, not mine. With this final statement, my husband's face went white, and he slumped, as if his soul had left his body. His eyes wandered aimlessly. I then spread out the evidence I had obtained from a detective agency on the table. Photos of Lisa flirting with a bartender, a photo of her handing over an expensive watch as a gift, photos of her entering a consumer finance office to take out a loan, and the note of Lisa's debt. All the evidence supported my story. My husband was speechless from the shock. Next to him, Lisa turned pale and her eyes darted back and forth. She was probably trying to come up with an excuse, but it would be impossible with all the evidence laid out.
Lisa, what on earth are you doing?
A thunderous shout filled the air. It was Lisa's father. Lisa's father, this big, tough guy, had this scary expression that made me nervous, even though he wasn't mad at me. Lisa got all tiny when he yelled at her.
I allowed you to go to the city in the hopes of it being a valuable social study, but it turned out to be a mistake. I didn't know you were working at a nightclub. And on top of that, you started visiting bars and got in debt. Come back home immediately.
Her father's imposing presence nearly felt like he could strike her at any moment, and Lisa began to cry. Lisa's father runs a company and is also a client of mine at the securities company. The only truth in Lisa's story was this part, but everything else was a lie. I had advised Lisa's father on sound investments, actually generating profit and earning his trust. Thus, the story Lisa told about the debt was completely false. Lisa tried to deceive me and take my money. It was nothing but a childish and despicable tactic. Her father, previously looking furious, now seemed deflated, disappointed by his daughter's foolish actions. I heard that Lisa was an only daughter. She was a cherished child born in her parents' later years. But perhaps being too precious led to overprotection, and she grew up without proper social understanding, as her father sadly observed. He turned to me, his expression solemn, and apologized.
Rebecca, I am terribly sorry for what happened. My daughter has caused you trouble. This is all due to my lack of supervision as a parent.
I quickly stopped him, who was almost ready to get on his knees to apologize to me. Please stop apologizing, sir. Your daughter is an adult. She must take responsibility for her own actions. Hearing this, the father nodded deeply. He is not only an excellent businessman, but also a man of character. How could such a respectable father have raised a daughter like Lisa? He made Lisa stand in front of me and apologize.
As you see, I'm sorry. Now, Lisa, apologize properly.
Half forced by her father, Lisa apologized. Her expression was sullen, like a child scolded for mischief, hardly seeming like a heartfelt apology. I'm sorry. Her voice was barely audible. You will be held responsible for this. Trying to deceive me and your father is no minor offense. You will be hearing from my lawyer soon, so be prepared. At the mention of a lawyer, Lisa flinched. She maybe didn't think it was a big deal to trick me, but that's not okay. As a working adult, she should naturally bear responsibility.
I'm truly sorry. Once again, I offer my apologies and will also pay for the damages.
After saying this, the father apologized again. Then he took Lisa by the hand and led her out. After the departure of Lisa and her father, a brief silence fell over the living room. My husband got left behind, and now he's looking around not sure what to do. No one here was on his side. My in-laws and other relatives looked at him with suspicion, waiting for his apology. Now that the witness Lisa, whom he thought was his greatest weapon, has vanished and the whole thing has been revealed as a farce, I wonder how he plans to explain himself. I turned towards my husband. Like a frightened puppy, he averted his eyes. He seems to understand that he is in a disadvantageous situation. What are you going to do? It seems everything was a lie, wasn't it? An apology here might have improved the situation a bit. Perhaps the attitudes of my in-laws and other relatives would have changed. However, my husband chose to be defiant.
I had no choice but to do this.
My husband's demeanor became arrogant again. His previously frightened eyes now filled with resolve, and he glared at me. I glared back without backing down. What do you mean you had no choice?
You're too perfect. You earn more than me, and you manage the household too. That leaves no place for me as a husband. I felt suffocated by your perfection. That's why I had an affair, to give myself some breathing room.
Seriously? I was dumbfounded by my husband's selfish excuse, at a loss for words. My in-laws and other relatives watching the situation seemed to feel the same way.
Brian, do you understand what you're saying? That's incredibly selfish. Yes, reflect on what you have done and apologize to Rebecca.
My in-laws confronted my husband, but he remained defiant to the end.
I'm sorry, Rebecca. We never raised him to be like this. I guess we have to think we never had a child. I'm sorry, Rebecca.
My in-laws apologized to me, but I had no intention of blaming them. They had always been sincere towards me. My husband is an adult. He must take responsibility for his actions. I can no longer live with such a husband. I have decided to live on my own. Given what has happened, I can't live with you any longer. I will divorce you and demand compensation.
Divorce? Wait, I can't pay compensation.
My husband panicked, finally realizing the seriousness of the situation. He had been relying on my income, living beyond his means. He had been able to frequent nightclubs and lavish gifts on Lisa because he was dipping into my salary. Moreover, he had no habit of saving, so paying compensation would be difficult. However, I had no intention of showing mercy here. I was the one who was unilaterally hurt by his affair, and I haven't even heard an apology.
My bad. I'll help out with the housework from now on, so please just don't divorce me. My salary alone isn't enough.
Don't joke with me. Helping with housework? Sharing household chores is a natural part of being married. And don't rely on my salary.
All right, I got it. At least spare me the compensation.
Don't be so entitled. You totally betrayed me without even thinking twice. Own up to it. I stood my ground, and my husband totally fell apart. Seeing him like that made me feel like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Later, I hired a lawyer and demanded compensation from both my husband and Lisa. Due to the affair and the attempt to defraud me of money, the amount of compensation was significantly higher than usual. Both my husband and Lisa begged for a reduction, but I quickly refused. Moreover, my husband lost his job when his company learned that he had conspired with his mistress to deceive his wife. Now, unemployed, my husband struggles with daily expenses and compensation, and reportedly begged his parents for help. However, my in-laws and other relatives have disowned him, I heard. Now, completely isolated, my husband is scraping by with day-to-day jobs while paying the compensation. Lisa also ended up with debts and compensation to pay, and reportedly returned to her parents for help. But they said no, saying it was her own fault. Under strict parental supervision, she works part-time jobs to pay the compensation. As for me, I finally have some peace. I live a comfortable life without being manipulated by my selfish ex-husband. When I lived with my ex-husband, I had to do household chores immediately after coming home exhausted from work. Now, if I'm tired, I can eat out or go out for drinks with colleagues. My weekends are no longer consumed by cleaning and laundry. It's like I'm back to my single days. Recently, I've been thinking about something. When I was single, my ex-husband was ambitious and serious. He did extra studying about his job outside of work hours. I was attracted to that aspect of him and married him. I probably spoiled him too much, wanting him to concentrate on his job, but it backfired, and he ended up slacking off and not caring about his work anymore. Just like Lisa, who was raised by caring parents but grew up to be a selfish and willful adult. Doing what you think is best for someone doesn't always lead to good results. This lesson is going to help me live a more satisfying life.